Welcome everyone tonight. Thank you for joining us on this webinar tonight on building resistance in children and fostering a trauma-informed PTA. This is a workshop that we usually do at Wake County Public Schools in person, and we have tried to adapt it here to do it as an online webinar, and I hope that you will enjoy it. Tonight I will be joined by Dr. Terrence Ruth. He's having technical difficulties getting on. I think you can all relate. The internet's not cooperating sometimes, and of course we have a storm coming in. Thanks for your patience, and I'm going to move ahead and hope that he'll be able to join us soon. My name is Yvonne Brannon, and I am chair of Public Schools First NC. This is a nonprofit organization that advocates for strong public schools and supports our teachers and all of our educators in providing that through the public school system. I'm a former social worker, and currently I am in a research position for social science research. I want to say that Dr. Terrence has also been a teacher and a principal throughout Florida and in Wake County schools. And he now also teaches in the social work department at NC State. He also has done a lot of work with alternative schools and alternative education settings. So I hope that he can join us because he'll have so much good information to share with you. I do want to take just a moment to kind of just do a little refresher for all of us. I'm hoping that you have had a chance to see the film Resilience and the paper tigers, which we've been offering over the weekend, and a related film, which is Broken Places. Lots of questions have already come to us about when you're going to show it again. We've shown it, and we're so thrilled that people are still reaching out and saying, I missed it. So we don't know, but we are trying to maybe by the end of April to have an opportunity to show Resilience and Broken Places again. But in the meantime, keep an eye on our Facebook page and so forth, and hopefully something will pop up. But our quick review tonight of the topic that we're talking about is adverse childhood experiences, adversity that happens particularly early in children's life, and how we look at these adverse childhood experiences through the lens of ACEs, through the lens of looking at activities and things that happen in the home. We're going to look at a quick review of ACEs, their relationship to toxic stress, and then what that has to do with resilience. So when we talk about ACEs and coming up with if you would, an ACEs score that folks have, these are in black here are the original things that were identified in the original study that was done some time ago. Since then, a recent research study over the last decade has added in and recognizes racism, bullying, sexual orientation, gender identification, discrimination, immigration, and now the pandemic as all sources and adversity in children. And the impact of these ACEs, creates when a child is experiencing prolonged and extreme adverse childhood experiences, it creates a huge impact on the body, and through what we call toxic stress. So all of y'all have heard us talk about that before. Welcome. There, Dr. Ruth is here again. And it talks about how through adversity, we see this condition called toxic stress. Now, I do want to make sure I pause here because Terrence and I always want to make sure that we talk about that ACEs, understanding one's ACEs, understanding those things that are impacting children so severely as to disrupt their biological development, their development of their brain, their DNA actually, we use this kind of short survey where we look at our scores and count our yeses. Yes, I'm experienced any of these things listed on the screen, and it produces our ACEs score. But we also make sure we say to folks that people are more than their ACE score. And ACEs kind of gives you an opportunity to kind of classify and understand problems children or groups of people are experiencing, but by no means do they determine someone's ultimate destination, and should not be used to decide how to diagnostically treat children. So the next slide I have for you is on toxic stress, and you remember that is what happens when we children are experiencing adversity. There's this dangerous biological syndrome. It's actually impacts children. It affects their response system. It can actually trigger havoc on the brain, impacting the bodies, and the actual, interferes with genes that actually attach themselves to the DNA and impact the child over time in other diseases. It impacts the child's ability to learn, and is associated from everything from misbehavior at school to heart disease. It can shorten the life expectancies of those who suffer it. And I think you saw that in the studies that were done. But we always want to make sure that even as we talk tonight, the reason we are with you tonight is to talk about that the counterweight, what trumps ACEs, is resiliency, and how we can build resiliency in our children, and how we can build it in our communities and in our schools. So tonight, when Terrence and I also do workshops with teachers and administrators, and with some nonprofits and some faith communities, but tonight we want to talk a little bit about parents, and we want to talk a little bit about the PTA, because these are two things that aren't normally covered in our workshops for teachers and principals. But we want to make sure that when we talk about resilience, that we remember that it's not innate, it's not particularly something you're born with. It can be taught. The right environment, the right caring adults can buffer the effects of toxic stress, and trauma-informed schools can help our students and our families. And so that's really important. And we want schools to be really, for me and Terrence, we work in the field of education. There's a lot of things that need to be done by the medical community, by the faith community, by the professional community of helping social workers and psychologists. There's plenty of work for those groups to do. We focus very much on schools and how we can help parents interact with their schools, and how we can help educators have the training and the tools they need to help families become trauma informed. So I want to switch up here now to the next set of slides. And Dr. Ruth, I think you're going to kick us off here with talking a little bit about these next two set of slides.
Yes, and hello everyone, and we're zooming into relationships in terms of how we are thinking about resilience in parenting, and we understand that you have the most time with your child, and you have the most time in terms of observing. But we just want to talk about the strategies that help build relationships, that help really move a child to understanding what it means to cope during difficult situations, and really demonstrates resilience. There's several layers of research that sit on this particular topic, and you have principles of positive psychology that really sort of fed this sort of thinking around what does it mean to parent and build relationships around resiliency. You also see where there's a focus around building relationships and communication within the family, so that it mirrors, so the child can see what you're doing at home and really mirror that when they go to school with their relationships. Also, there's certain communication skills that it is really encouraged to really show your child, and listening, assertiveness, problem solving. These are some of the characteristics that we encourage parents to want to build within their child. But really, as you see here, connect, really spending that one-on-one time. What we say to teachers and administrators is that one adult. And so that one-on-one time where they feel that somebody cares about me, and really you being that first adult before they even get to a school that says that I care, that you are the one. Also social supports, really increase their time around people who care about them. is really significant, especially when they hit really difficult times, that they have a sort of an account of positive interaction with individuals. And then also, like I said earlier, problem solving. One of the main things you see when someone is really trying to hide, they sort of avoid asking questions. They sort of avoid really difficult problems, but really, building inside your child the ability to be able to ask questions and face difficult problems, and really encouraging them to build sort of problem-solving strategies. Next slide. Now here is where we sort of try to mirror what we tell our teachers. We sort of walk through with teachers a way in which you build your listening and your response to certain individuals in the classrooms to really sort of build relationships. So here you see, number one, we want to listen, let them talk, give them time to really process what they're going through, and give them time to say what they have to say, and be honest and transparent about what's going on at school or at home. One thing that we thought that was really significant is teaching kids really self-care. What does it mean to take a break? Right now we're at home, and it's hard to regulate how much work you're doing and how far you go, but really teaching them at home, really, what does it mean to have boundaries around what you can and your capacity, what you're able to do. But what we feel that is really significant in sort of this model is really modeling resiliency. Your child is going to do and handle situations pretty much in reflection of how you handle situations. And so they're going to see and observe how you, when times are hard, how you respond to certain particular situations. And they're going to, with their eyes, observe and take in strategies, either deliberate or indirectly. And so it's really a positive a step to really model what does it mean to build resiliency. And we know that resiliency is really an end product. So the process towards resilience is really coping strategies. How are you coping with really difficult problems? And your child will pick up some of those coping strategies themselves. And so we really try to encourage parents to really model what they would like for their child to see at the school.
Okay, so and I want to kind of talk a little bit about building a relationship. Also, as we talked about earlier, how important it is to build a relationship with your child's school. And we understand that this is not always easy for some parents. Sometimes it's a matter of time, the time to, be at a school or to connect with a school or drop by a school. It's very hard for many parents with their work schedule or other children at home, other obligations in the family to do this. But, we're learning really a lot during this last 3 weeks, that there are a lot of ways that we now know how to communicate that we never did before. We've got teachers, video calling our kids on, their smartphones. We've got teachers doing Zoom meetings with their kids. We're seeing where there's increase in people using their smartphones or just their little cell phone to communicate and text with teachers. So we let's keep this going. Let's use these experiences to collaborate with our teacher. I think the most powerful thing that a parent can do at the beginning of a semester or beginning of a new quarter in school, or if they're seeing something that's not going so well, is to ask the teacher, invite the teacher, how can you work with them? And these are much more powerful interactions than just showing up when there's a problem has already occurred, but showing up early to say, I want to share some things about my child with you. These are things that, my child has a stress response to these things. These are the kind of ways that I'm working to help my child cope, or these are the kind of ways I'm working to help my kid with their homework. You don't have to have a 504 or an IEP to collaborate with your teacher, right? So really this is important. And then, advocating for your children. Some parents are very comfortable with this, many parents are not. but really find a way to advocate for your child. And if you're not comfortable talking to the school teacher, ask to meet with the assistant principal, ask to meet with the school counselor, ask to meet with the social worker. There are other helping resources in the school system that you might feel a little bit more comfortable about. Or you may just want to go in and ask for an appointment with a social worker because you are seeking community help, agencies in the community, and you don't know how to go about that. You're worried about how to interact with local groups and get your children help. But really, the school system staff is there to help you, and you should reach out for that help. And then, you know, one of the things that I think is really important is that you value your child's view. When we've talked to a lot of children who've been suspended or expelled, when we talk to a lot of kids who are having behavioral problems at school, a lot of times we hear very young children and teenagers talk about that nobody listens to them, nobody values their opinion, nobody understands how they feel. So it's really important to start that from home. And that doesn't mean that you think your child never makes a wrong move or that your child is always right, but it means that you're listening and you're valuing their view. And if they think they're being bullied, then you have the right and you have the responsibility to go and talk with the school staff to make sure that that perspective is put in place. If a child is brave enough to tell you about things that they feel bullied over, please take it really serious and go and see if you can be an intervening factor. Because a lot of the restorative justice programs that we are now seeing in our schools rely upon students being able to say, hey, that bothers me. That impacts me. I don't like that. And working with other students and figuring out a way that we can fix it. A few other quick comments that I will add is that visit the school. I know I just said earlier that's hard, but if you can find one thing to do, and maybe it's just once a month you go and have lunch with your kid at school, maybe it's once a month you try to stop by and on the beginning of the class, the day, and just wave at the teacher. But I think it's, if you can kind of go and see where your kid's sitting and how their layout in their school, I think it would make you both feel a lot better. The other thing that I would say is that talk to your kid a little bit, especially when your kid gets to middle school and high school. Talk to them a little bit about membership issues. Not every kid's going to make the baseball team. Not every kid's going to be picked to be in a particular activity, but it's really important that we pay attention and encourage our kids to try and be prepared to help them talk through how they feel in terms of rejections. This is really critical, especially during the middle school years, when kids have a lot of emotions are running really high, and their coping skills have not yet developed to match them. So that's important. And I don't think I have to tell anybody on this webinar tonight about the importance of social media, because we're all benefit and all suffer from it as adults and as workers, and in terms of our children. So you know, this is probably, you can consider a lot of what we're saying here tonight is things that you probably already thought of and probably think of as, I've already know this. And that's the beauty of a lot of things around resiliency and being trauma informed and building resiliency in our children. Sometimes, oftentimes, it is just good common sense that we try to think of how we want to treat our children in kind of the ways that we want people to treat us. And so I think it's important. So let's switch over here and talk a little bit about the PTA, Terrence.
Yeah, so with the PTA, and again, I joined, my son is in kindergarten, so I joined the PTA this year, and I can talk from that side now. I was a teacher and administrator, so I had that lens, and now being a part of the PTA, I sort of see both sides. And what I've seen was most useful, just being inclusive. So consider, the school-wide demographics. Who is missing that should be a part of the membership, and what voices do you need to capture when designing programs, or who should be over certain offices within the PTA membership. Also, you really want to look at equity in across sort of income, and what are the membership fees? Are the fees at a certain level to where certain families are excluded from being a part of the PTA? Are there ways in which you can creatively sponsor parents? I know some schools have done that. They've dropped off money at the front office so that the parent that is being sponsored can have dignity and not know, who is sponsoring what. And it really was creative ways that our PTA talked about it. Also, you want to seek unique and diverse ways to engage families to join the PTA. I know that we would go to all the school-wide events, and we would do recruiting at the school-wide events. And we would look for all sorts of parents that we wanted to be involved. But also, we tried to make sure that if we're just picking up our child, we were recruiting even during pickup and drive-through. So we just want you to be deliberate about the voices that you bring into your PTA membership to really plan projects and programs. You want to make sure that you're considerate of all and inclusive of all of the demographics that's in your school. But one that we felt that was really important is being creative around your meetings. Just like now, we're forced into virtual and teleconferencing. That is possible even when we are moved back into brick and mortar. You can still hold PTA meetings or have it to where there's a hybrid approach. But also, you want to think about the timing of the meetings. What if parents have to work at certain times of day? How long do you want to keep those meetings? What time of day? Is there childcare provided? But these are some of the things that, when you reflect on them, they're pretty straightforward, but sometimes it's easy to forget.
And I would like to add a note here that I've noticed that in Wake County, the superintendent and the chair of the school board has been doing a weekly update and video, and they're posting that on YouTube. So I hope they'll keep doing that for a long time afterwards, because I think that's really much more friendly and interesting than it is to go try to find some notes or some memo or some press release that was let. But to go on YouTube to the Wake County Public School channel, and there it is, a weekly update. So think about that too, is that, maybe you could record some of your meetings and post them later on Facebook or on your website, or create a YouTube channel for your school. It's free. But I'm hoping a lot of PTA members are listening to us tonight. I've been a lifelong PTA member, and was PTA president many, many times of my children's school. And I look back and I think I could have done a much better job if I'd have had someone just to kind of nudge me a little bit to think about some of these things around membership and leadership, being inclusive, and really being sensitive to issues around membership. I know that when I was growing up, money was very limited and very focused on getting our groceries and our light bills paid, and membership to PTA was not going to be on that list. And that's an automatic, way to make parents feel disengaged from your school. And we know that membership's important, but all programs should be open and offered regardless of membership, we hope. So that brings me, Terrence, to fundraising. I know you want to talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, fundraising as well. We want to be careful in the language we use and the strategies we use around fundraising, but because we also want to be inclusive in our activities that include fundraising and really fun events. We want to be sensitive to students who do not have really the network, really that door-to-door, where they have to reach a certain threshold in order to be rewarded or achieve. Sometimes there's students who don't have access to that volume of individual to meet that threshold. And so what if we rewarded in a different way that included that student that didn't have the capacity to really meet a certain fundraising threshold. Also, we want to offer ways for parents to contribute to fundraising. And it doesn't necessarily have to be just money. It could be volunteering. It could be transportation. It could be, it's different ways in which a parent can contribute that has to do with money. And so being creative around that way also will help your recruiting as well. If the pressure of not having to have a certain amount of money or the pressure to have to fundraise is not on a parent, you may get a different voice in the room. Also, you want to use fundraising strategies to reward all students. For example, you don't want to just reward individual, but maybe a class, if they get to a certain level of rewards, a certain amount of money or tickets sold, they get the whole class gets celebrated rather than just 1 or 2 or 5 students. Also, just be thoughtful around theme days, where I think there's a Spirit Week where you have certain T-shirts or jerseys you have to wear. What if a kid can't afford a Nike jersey, or they can't afford the school T-shirt? How are you supplementing or allowing all students to participate in those events? And then the last one, going back to Spirit Wear, is what if you made it to where you had a reserve of shirts that you had for students who wanted to get access to the Spirit Wear, rather than just having the price tag lead the conversation? What if you're able to reach parents by saying, we have already sponsored a certain number of T-shirts within our fundraising that would allow for all kids to participate? Or I know one school, they bought T-shirts for every student. So every student got a T-shirt. So there's ways in which you can be creative around making sure your spirit and themed events are inclusive.
Okay, and I want to talk a little bit now about PTA programs, and it's really kind of redundant, some of the things we've already said here, but it's the same thing. It's being very, very thoughtful when you're planning your programs to select dates and times and activities that lots of parents want to participate with. Recently, I was at a PTA to do a program, and before their program, they had a food truck. And it was a reasonably priced food truck with the basics, more like hot dogs and chips and things like that. And a lot, the PTA president told me that was the biggest turnout for any program they had, because they had the food truck there, and they had a special, like for like $3, you get a hot dog and a drink, something like that. And I thought, well, that was clever. It was clever to kind of include some food, and to do it in a reasonable price, and to do it at 6 o'clock so people could do it on their way home, instead of going home and then trying to find supper and then coming back. And then the other thing is to be very careful that you try to promote diversity in the people you invite in to do your programs. And we've learned the hard way over the last couple of years that that we have to be very sensitive to calendar. We have to be very sensitive to holidays and providing transportation, trying to think about having childcare for programs, and then being very sensitive. I think Terrence mentioned it earlier. This kind of goes hand in glove. When you're doing your programs and you vary the time, then it might help in terms of transportation and childcare and those kind of things. We've already talked about varying our PTA programs. And then we've already talked about making sure that all families feel like they're involved and they're part of the school, that things should never be for PTA members only. It should, PTA is there to support and endorse the school, and they do wonderful things, but all newsletters, all announcements, all programs have to be open to all parents in the school. And I think that is exactly what people do. But and also think about things like if you need a translator there, that those kind of things are important to also consider. So we've got a few more slides here, and then we're going to take a break and let you ask some questions and talk about some things. But we just kind of want to take a minute to summarize what we've been talking about. We know that ACEs are important. We know that they trigger toxic stress. We know that these kind of things happening at school are very important. And one of the things that Terrence and I lobby very, very hard for is that It's critical that we understand being trauma informed, and once we are, that we try to do something to prevent and disrupt and change that environment, because you saw the film's Resilience in Broken Places. Ignoring trauma in children and ignoring the adversity they're facing is an extremely costly thing for our society. It not only hampers and delays the lifetime opportunities for a child, but it also costs our society in tons of ways. When we have children who are unable to take their place in society, unable to be productive, participating adults. So we feel really strongly that as we talk about all these things, that we feel like once you have an understanding of how important it is to be trauma sensitive and to use social emotional learning tools and skills, that you then kind of have an obligation, and we hope you'll feel that way, to help us create better programs, for whether it's PTA offering the program, or our teachers offering the instruction, or our guidance counselors, providing services to our children, or how parents interact with our school. We're encouraging people to do that, and we believe very strongly, and research is absolutely piled 10 stories high, that resilience can be learned, it can be strengthened, even in us as adults. We can learn new coping skills to build our own resilience, and that teaching resilience can help reduce the impact of stress on our children. And even if your child is only experiencing, maybe your child's ACE score is 1 or 2, that child still has impact on their ability to learn and pay attention and to be successful. So we don't want to overlook any child. Terrence tells a story all the time about a lot of his students at NC State who are at high risk of dropping out of school and not being successful, even though they've made it this far. Their inability to deal with stress around school performance at college level is Terrence, could add a few comments. I don't want to speak for you, because you see these kids all the time.
No, you're exactly right. The pressure of maintaining a 4.0, or the pressure of being perfect, or the pressure of only receiving an A, that pressure, even at that achievement level, being in college, and it still requires resiliency, the relationship building, the strategies that we talked about in here, that carries with the student even when they go to college.
And so, and before we take a question, I'll just end by saying that we've thrown out some tips for you and your kids, and some tips for PTA members. But the thing to remember about your own child is that what works for you and your child doesn't work for other kids necessarily. And sometimes, no matter how much we attempt to do what we need, sometimes we do need help from mental health professionals. And that should be, something that we should feel good about. And there are mental health professionals. Sometimes you can contact those directly through your human service department, social services department in a county. Sometimes you can contact those through your school. They're a wealth of resource, and sometimes the school will have the mental health professionals themselves who can start you on that path of helping you figure out how to deal with issues around your kids. So I want to stop there for a minute, and we've talked about a lot of stuff. We've gone fast, trying to beat that storm out there. But I wonder if anyone has any questions, Elizabeth, that you could shoot our way.
I don't see any questions yet, but definitely send them in the questions section.
Minutes, yeah. Okay. So one of the questions that that folks often have are, where are some resources that we can get to? And I do want to say that we're adding resources every day to our website. And I have a slide in a few minutes I'll bring up, but if you go to Public Schools First NC and you look under issues, resilience, there are a ton of really wonderful resources. Last night we had a webinar on broken places with Dr. Kiana Cryer-Coupé and Dr. Mary Haskett and Dr. Terrence Ruth, and it was excellent. It is posted on our YouTube channel right now. If you missed that, go watch that video, because you'll see that Terrence and I learned an awful lot of information last night about research that that they are both doing at NC State, and we'll be posting that information in a post soon and adding it to our website. So that's a great place to go. Okay, I see a question about what do we do if we think our PTA is not trauma informed. I always like to go and talk to the PTA president. A person who's raised their hand to be a PTA president is a saint already, because of the tremendous amount of work and commitment that person is going to be putting in serving your school. So I say, you know, send them an email or a text and ask them if they have some time that you could chat with them. And go talk to the PTA president and make some positive suggestions about ways that you think the PTA could be more inclusive and could reach out more. I will tell you that's a great place to start. You can also, PTA meetings are by law, you know, by their bylaws, open. And so, you know, find out when the PTA board is meeting and show up at the board meeting and ask if you can have a few minutes on the agenda. This is a great way to have some input, and also maybe to get involved and find out if there's a way for you to join a committee that could be working on some of those kind of things. Elizabeth, do you have anything else?
Nope, not yet.
Okay. So I want to also go to this next slide. And, you know, if you have some questions, you know, keep bringing them on. We can stop at any moment now and join them. And one of the things that we also want to talk about is that about the advocacy is it's very important that as you listen to us tonight and you think about these things, that you're not only just advocating at home and at school, but in the PTA, but even at your place of worship, and in the community. Be sure you're lobbying with your local elected officials or your state elected officials. Our school systems are woefully understaffed.
Yeah.
In Wake County, where one of the most wealthy school systems in the state, social workers are about sharing 2 schools at least. And for a friend of mine who's a social worker in Wake County, she has a middle school and an elementary school. And so Terrence, her combined caseload is 2,300 kids. Right, 2,300 kids are enrolled at the elementary and the middle school. So you can imagine that what she is doing in terms of services for the families are absolutely triage. Yeah. Suicide alerts, families being kicked out of their home, you know, the very serious events. She didn't have time to deal with bullying. She didn't have much time to deal with issues around connecting families to community services. She's usually working to prevent serious issues from getting, you know, out of control. So we know that we need more social workers. When we look at the numbers of what's recommended by experts, they recommend that we have a social worker for every 250 to 500 kids. And we have like 1 social worker for like every 2,300 kids. They recommend a school psychologist, like 1 for every 750 kids. And we have like 1 for every 2,400 kids. They recommend that every school have a nurse. And we really have, it's the same thing. There's a school nurse for about every 2,350 kids. So we are understaffing our public school system with the resources they need to really be able to help kids learn how to cope in their classroom and in their school. We're shortchanging our teachers from getting the training they need from these helping professionals to know how to deal with kids in their classroom. And we're shortchanging our administrators who are spending most of their time handling behavioral issues instead of being the instructional leader in their school.
Also,
Terrence, do you want to add anything on that?
yeah, also that third bullet that looks at community, I've seen where parents have started early and often to just do check-in meetings with the area superintendent, with the principal, and with the teachers, not out of any alarm, just, hey, how you doing? Just want to check in and see if the school needed anything from parents. I mean, it was literally just a check-in. What they're doing is building social capital. They're building relationship with these educators, and they're building connections with these educators. And I've seen where parents were a little bit intimidated to meet with the area superintendent, or intimidated to meet with the principal or their elected official. There was intimidation, but if you talk to Yvonne, a parent voice is gold. I mean, parent voice advocating for their school and for their child is gold. And so I encourage you early and often to meet with your area superintendent, your principal, your teacher, and your elected officials.
Right. So this is really important. So one of the things that we'll kind of, I mentioned to you earlier, the resource. So here is a little photo of our website, and you can see here all the things that we have here. And if you look under issues, you'll see resilience. And then there's tons of resources here and lots of really great books. Last night, a lot of parents were interested in restorative justice. How does restorative justice work? Can you use restorative justice in your homes? You can. It's a great thing to do in homes, but it's a wonderful tool to use in schools. So we have a lot of stuff on here about education justice, how we can work to have a more just social network so we don't have so many kids being suspended or expelled out of school. So there's some resources there. And a lot of parents were asking us about how they can really get involved in their community with around some of these issues. Because one of the things that we're obviously trying to do, we care very deeply about, is disrupting the impact of ACEs, adversity, on our young children. And to, the dream is right, you prevent child abuse and neglect. But where it exists, we are trying to make sure that we work to eliminate that. And so I'll close by saying that that's not all those things we said are important, but also part of it is fighting poverty. We know that Terrence and I see kids in all spectrum of life, at all income levels, all racial groups, from all family types, who have high ACE scores. So it cuts across many segments of our society. Child abuse and neglect, alcoholism, addictive behavior in the home, domestic violence, can find its way in many homes, regardless of income. But what we do know also is that poverty makes it so much harder to combat and to deal with. I have an ACE score of 7 and Terrence is an 8. And we talk a lot about how we were able to overcome some of the adversity in our life and be successful adults. We're calling ourselves successful adults. And one of the big things for me was I was never homeless. And while money was very tight and food was not to be wasted in our home, we never had to go for 3 or 4 days with no food in the home. And we never had to be homeless. So those impacts of poverty are just devastating on families. So we talk a lot about fighting poverty, fighting child hunger, and we also talk about making sure that you lift up families. Terrence, let's talk about that just for a second, because that's one of the things that that we know is important in this too, what we do with families.
Yeah, I spent several of my career in terms of the school building as an administrator and as a teacher in schools that had high poverty. And I've seen uncles, aunts, brothers and sisters experience this level of poverty that really was a barrier to having a healthy learning environment at the school. So there was areas in which there was elements of their life that we had to address before we even got to just a quality of learning environment. And if you, and especially sitting on top of what we're experiencing right now, where elements of poverty is really exacerbated with the conditions that we're seeing right now. Addressing some of the social conditions is a part of preparing a kid for the learning environment and for a healthy and a resilient future. And so poverty is a key element, and I've seen it year after year. I've seen families, generations come through my school, and the element that's continuing across all of them is how they are impacted by social ills. And so I have seen firsthand that learning is a great tool, but there's barriers in community that prevent that from being as effective a tool.
Right, and so one of the things that we'll end with tonight is if you probably noticed throughout the presentation on things that parents can do and things that PTAs can do, it is the element of grace and kindness, and what we're going through right now is unprecedented. And as we come out of this, we know there's going to be, we need a lot of grace and a lot of kindness and a lot of forgiveness for some of the things that are happening. And I don't even know the impact of the trauma around this is going to be on many families who are losing their jobs and you know, unheard of numbers, and who will be faced with long-term consequences of loss of income in the family. We know that when a family has a livable wage and access to health care and mental health services, that they are very, very strongly linked to a success path, a path to success. But when family income is cut in half, and when family income is insufficient, that this brings on a lot of issues of child neglect and abuse in the home. So, but we appreciate you coming tonight and to joining with us. We want to make sure that we always talk about the beauty of the work we're doing around resilience, and that it is hopeful.
Yes.
We understand that now, the more we understand the impact of childhood adversity on children's brains, their bodies, the more we change the conversation from what's wrong with you to what can I do to help you, what's going on with you, what's happening with you. The more these things keep happening, the better for our society is to being informed around that. And we know that this science, this biology of stress, all this understanding we're having about how this stress, toxic stress, impacts our DNA, this is helping us figure out ways to serve kids better. Doctors right now, our researchers and medical researchers are finding ways to test children and looking at their stress response system, realizing early on some kids are more sensitive than others. How can we build strategies of parenting and helping families to help these kids deal with this? So there's a lot of really hopeful, exciting research being done, and we're very excited to be a part of that. We're glad to see what the medical community is getting involved. The pediatricians are screening kids and trying to connect kids to, you know, to mental health services they need. So there's a lot of hope out there, and resiliency is a tool of great hope. So all it takes, and Terrence and I know this, is one caring adult. He and I both can tell you stories you don't want to hear now of how one or two or three adults in our life along the way were the persons who lifted us up from one place to the next in our lives and helped us be successful. We know that one adult, so we want to leave you tonight with the charge that we want you to be that adult, be that one caring adult, because that's all it takes to make a difference in a child's life. Whether it's a child you know, or a child you teach, or a child you coach, or a child you sit next to in church. All it takes is one caring adult. So be that adult, hashtag be the one. So thank you tonight for coming and joining us. And this is taped, and we hope to have it on the web. If you're interested in us doing a program, a webinar for your school or your PTA or your nonprofit or your faith community, you know, here's how you can find us: on Facebook, on Instagram. Here's our email address. Here's our Twitter account, our website. So contact us, and if we can help you in any way, we're available to do that. Good night, Terrence.
Good
Good night,
night.
everybody. Good night, Elizabeth. Bye-bye.